Welcome to Resilience Development in Action, where strength meets strategy and courage to help you move forward. Each week, your host, Steve Bisson, a therapist with over 2 decades of experience in the first responder community, brings you powerful conversations about resilience, growth, and healing through trauma and grief. Through authentic interviews, expert discussions, and real-world experiences, we dive deep into the heart of human resilience. We explore crucial topics like trauma recovery, grief processing, stress management, and emotional well-being. This is Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson.
GetFree.ai. You heard me talk about it. I'm going to keep on talking about it because I love it. I've had about a year and a half, 18 months practice with it, and I still enjoy it. And it saves me time and it saves me energy. Free.ai takes your note, makes what you're talking with a client, just press record. And it does either a transcript, it does a subjective and an objective with a letter if needed for your client and for whoever might need it. So for $99 a month, it saves me so much time that it's worthwhile. And if you do it for a whole year, guess what? You get 10% off. More importantly, this is what you got to remember, because you are my audience that listens to Resilience Development in Action. If you do listen to this and you want to use free.ai, put in the code STEVE50 in the promo code area, STEVE50, and you will get $50 off in addition to everything we just talked about. Get freed from writing your notes. Get freed from even writing your transcripts. Use that to your advantage. Free.ai, a great service. Go to getfree.ai and you will get one of the best services that will save you time and money. And I highly encourage you to do so. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 228. If you haven't listened to episode 227, it was with Amanda Rizzoli. We talked about mental health in Milford, Massachusetts, with working with the police. We talked also about being a spouse of a law enforcement officer and the effects on that. So go back and listen to that. But today is a returning guest. But to me, it's not a returning guest. It's a returning friend. I've worked with Blythe at a company for a couple of years, and she is one of the few people I stayed in touch with. And we've worked on projects together. We've exchanged clients at times, but just a wonderful human being. And look, I can even say I have her book, and it's mine.
It is.
Well, welcome, Blythe Landry, to Resilience Development in Action. Sorry, old habits die hard.
Oh, yeah. I get it. Yeah.
And for those of you who may, hopefully this sounds really good. It sounds like I hear her fine. She hears me fine, but my microphone decided not to work today. So, hey, we're just flying by the seat of our pants. But that's kind of what we've always done, me and her. One of the things I want to tribute to her, and this is the truth, I have a lot of trust in Blythe. I've worked with her for a long time. And she sends me referrals, or she says, hey, I need this. We don't need to say thank you. We don't need to kiss up, ask for stuff that we don't need. We just jump to what needs to be done. And yeah, once in a while we catch up on our lives. But ultimately, me, it's a show of respect. Not that we're all business, but that there's a time for both. And there's not like, well, you weren't nice about this. There's none of that crap. And I really admire Blythe for that as a friend, as a colleague, but someone as a human being. I just truly love you. And I want to start off by saying that.
I feel the same way, Steve. I think you're amazing. We've always had a good and a wonderful connection right from the beginning.
I mean, we're not going to talk about the company itself. I try not to promote things I don't believe in. But I do remember one thing is that something whacked was, and I'm not going to say what it was, and it was in Slack, I believe. You wrote to me privately, like, do you think this makes any sense? And then we exchanged. I think that's how we really started to connect, because we were kind of like, as a professional, this is wrong. And the reason why I don't say names, because I don't want to be called slandering any company. But the truth is that we got along 99% of the time. So, I'm describing you from my point of view, which is probably more friendly. But how about you introduce yourself again? I know you've introduced yourself on episode, I want to say 41, right? But 228 episodes now, so almost 200 down the road. Maybe people.
That's incredible. So I admire Your consistency, Steve. It's a beautiful thing. And I know this podcast is helping a lot of people. And every time you put yourself out there, you bring someone in who can help your community. And I love it. So yeah, I'm Blythe. Obviously, I'm a therapist and coach like Steve. I specialize in trauma and grief. And I've been doing this work for 25 years. I'm almost 51. And it's amazing the things that you learn just in doing something for a long time, right? And one of the things you learn is you always have more to learn. So I'm always learning. I'm always working on myself. I always am in my own therapy, my own coaching. And my business and my practice has had so many iterations through the years, right? So as Steve shared, I have a book out on trauma. It's called Trauma Intelligence, The Art of Helping in a World Filled with Pain. I also run and have a team that helps me run an amazing team, a trauma-informed grief coaching certification program. And it's specifically for grievers, many of whom have gone through very traumatic loss. So that's my current project, and done work with the Coast Guard, right? With Steve and I did a project together with Mind Strong Guardians through the Coast Guard for trauma stuff. And also done tons of trainings for organizations, nonprofits, a Fortune 5 company, the Louisiana Department of Health on trauma and how that impacts us, and secondary trauma and how that impacts us, right? So I love my job. I don't ever want to retire. It's my favorite thing about myself. It's the thing that I know that I'm consistently good at. And that's something that brings me great pride and humility and gratitude. So that's where I'm coming from.
Well, that's probably why we get along for so many other reasons. Like,
yeah,
we're both, I just turned 50 a couple months ago. I've been doing this for 26 years, more years than I have not done it. And
that's right.
What I love about what you talked about is exactly what I feel most people, and again, there's no knock on anyone, but in our field, and we'll get back to the first responder stuff and the military stuff, very important stuff. But what I find that people make a mistake is, here's my niche and I'll never move from it. And I started as a child and family specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And, I hear you talked about your career and where you've been. That's exactly it, is that we just keep on evolving and changing stuff because that's what we need to do. And that's why, like you, I've worked with people in the Fortune 500 companies, and I've worked in going to the homeless shelters and homeless, we call it the weeds around here, but I went to the weeds and talked to people and everywhere in between. And learning to be able to adapt to what is needed is so important. But then when you find your passion, you make that the main part, but not singularly the part.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, we're definitely aligned on that. Mm-hmm.
And I just had therapy, so I'm feeling really good. I have my therapy right before this recording. So thanks, Joe. I know he doesn't listen, but makes me feel good to say thank you. But no, I think that's what, it's important to talk about a lot of this stuff. One of the things I want to mention on this podcast, because I think military stuff is important to me too. I really enjoyed working with you on the Mind Strong Guardians and Justin and our whole team. And because there are people who were there who had lived experience, I'm not in liberty to discuss their names. That's not my job. That's for them if they want to talk about it. But we had, lived experience, people who've been through trauma, sexual assault, particularly in the Coast Guard, and we were doing fantastic work. And one of the things that I loved is that I was typically the only male in the room, and I was one of the leaders with Blythe. And I would always ask Blythe, I'm like, I'm the dude, and these are all women who unfortunately have had some sexual trauma of some sort. And you'd be like, yeah, you're a trustworthy person. I don't know where you come from that, but I'm like, you always encouraged me to be myself. And the more I was myself, the more people were comfortable with me. So I remember that too. Do you think that when people are talking about hard stuff, whether it's trauma, grief, the authenticity of the therapist is as important as the authenticity of the client?
Yeah, as much, even more, right? Because if I'm authentic, I invite the other person to be authentic. Right? I think that's where so many of us miss the boat, and we're not trained properly as clinicians on this, is that being present in that relationship, that whether it's an educational relationship, whether it's a therapeutic, whether it's a coaching relationship, is so crucial, because otherwise I'm just a warm body sitting across from someone that has no skin in the game. And I've always felt like if my client is going to come and be that vulnerable and tell me things that nobody else in their life knows about them, how dare I not be part of this conversation, right? It's not fair. And so while I don't think obviously I should be disclosing everything about myself all the time, there are times when disclosure, where relatability, where saying, hey, it's okay, you're not alone, are crucial to helping another person. Yeah.
I can't remember what the exact wording was, but I'll put it the best way I can. Appropriate disclosure is so important, particularly working with the military, the first responder. And frankly, like when I work with women with trauma, I got to be as authentic as I can because they can read a fucking fake a mile away.
Yep.
More importantly, they're like, oh, I can trust this person, which is so
That's
important.
Right. Yes.
And I think that that's the disclosure you're talking about. We're not here to I'm not here to put down what we learn as education. But for me, I go back to more of a Buddhist practice, is that there's a difference between privacy and secrecy.
That's good.
It's private. That's not for you. And when I talk to my therapist, sometimes I'll talk about it, but that's my privacy. That's my thing I got to work on. But then when you go into secrecy, like, oh, what's your experience with blank, or why are we being secret about that? When people ask me, do you have 2 kids? Well, they can Google it. They'll know I have 2 kids. I don't believe in keeping secrets from my clients. And I think that that's really what encourages people. Can you talk a little more about that being like appropriate self-disclosure while also being authentic, and secrecy and privacy?
Yeah, well, I think there's a beautiful distinction between secrecy and privacy, and that's true of all our relationships, right? I think the litmus test that I use is, am I sharing this to make it about me, or am I sharing this so that they feel connected and less alone? And if the answer every time is, I'm sharing this so that they feel connected, supported, seen, and not alone, then I'm always on the right side of it, right? Obviously, it should never be about me getting my needs met. But it should always be about being authentic so that that person can get their needs met. Sometimes I find myself feeling this strong intuition with certain clients to tell them something I've never told a client before, right? That, again, tells me that that's an indicator that this is about them needing to hear this in this moment. And that intuition, I think, comes from being authentic. It comes from caring. It comes from not being just a brick wall, right? It comes from not just disclosure, but authentically being attached to someone in a way that you want them to be attached to you in the service of helping them heal.
The best compliment I ever got, and I'm sure this has happened to you, is that, oh my God, I feel like I can talk to you. You're not putting on a face. You're not.
Yes.
We don't show up like, again, this is how I dress today for work, and I'm going to see clients that way. It's not unprofessional. I'm not like, whatever bad message I can have on my shirt, but it's so informal that people are like, oh, you're informal, I can talk to you. I think that plays a huge factor, but particularly I think about my first responders and the military personnel that we've both worked with. Can you talk a little more about how military personnel would react if I was in a suit and tie, for example, or I was like, tell me how you feel about that.
Well, first of all, it could be very triggering, right? Activating, because it can remind them of their need to be formal, their need to defer, right? Especially depending on their rank in the military. And so that could actually re-trigger trauma, because we already know in many facets of the military, it is not safe to have emotion. It is not safe to be vulnerable. It is not safe to ask for help, even though it's said that it is. There's all these underlying and obvious and also idiosyncratic ways that gets shoved aside. And so I think that would be very potentially off-putting to someone, right? And potentially make them feel really unsafe and or like they had to defer to you instead of have an equal connection to you. Is that something that you've experienced or heard about, Steve?
100%. I didn't think about that part. I never put it in words, so I appreciate it. One of the guys once told me is like, when I went for my fit for duty, there was a guy in a suit and tie who was evaluating me. When I was sitting with you, I feel like, I'm talking to a friend, a paid friend, but nonetheless a friend, because you're more informal and you're able to connect with me. So when I say something, you can say it's messed up or whatever. And I think that, when one of the constant message on my podcast for resilience development in action is that you got to know which culture you're working with,
Yes. And you have to meet them where they are. Right.
and I talk about a lot about the first responder culture.
Yep.
But the military culture is its own freaking animal, if you ask me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's its own culture. It's this secret world of things, right? Look what's on the news today. I mean, it's a disaster. But the reality of it is like it's this whole secret world where people have different stated and unstated expectations, right? And as you and I saw for Mind Strong, and we're working on the sexual trauma and the operational trauma in the Coast Guard, that there's still such a stigma to even things that are helpful, right? Those things get taken away. They get removed. They get shoved under the rug. You almost get like mildly penalized or punitive language when you're trying to bring the light out of the darkness. And I think it's sort of like this very interesting family dynamic that happens when kids are molested in homes, right? Where the family does everything they can to keep it a secret and the non-abusive spouse pretends like nothing's happening. This happens in the military. It's like another familial experience where everything bad that's going on is only moderately addressed, and the damage is catastrophic.
Right. And go ahead.
They talk about collateral damage in war and those things. What they don't talk about is the emotional collateral damage of not addressing the realistic and real things that are happening for first responders and military, both.
I think that with the military, it's even worse because with some departments in general, I'm not saying there's transparency, but there is some transparency. And I say this very lightly. And different units, right? Different parts of the country are responding in different ways. Different police departments, different fire departments, different. But before we got on, we were talking about my friend Jeff Dill, and he started and runs Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance. And he and I have been working on a book for a long time. It's going to come out at some point, and it's interviewing family members of people who lost their first responder to suicide. Right. One of the things that he does is since 2010 tracked firefighter, paramedic, and EMT suicides, right? EMS suicides. And let's just say this: not everybody likes what he's doing. Right. And he has been blackballed in some situations for doing the right thing, for actually bringing voice to what's actually going on. He also does something really amazing. He hosts a retreat every year for those who have lost their first responder to suicide. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But yeah, I mean, let's just say not everybody is smiling upon what he's doing, which is just telling the truth. And that's part of the secrecy we just talked about earlier is that, you talk about the military. One of the stories that I keep on plays back in my head all the time. There was an issue with a particular person and a few women reported him. He was moved to another unit. He wasn't discharged. And why was he moved? And then the other unit was blind to what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the secrecy that gets really in the way, in my opinion. And when you call it out, like, I feel like what we do in general and what I do in my job, you're not going to be popular. But I've always thought, and I can't remember who said this, but to be popular means you're not necessarily telling the truth.
That, and if everyone likes you, you probably have zero integrity, right? I always think we're saying the same thing in a different way. I always think like, if everyone in the world likes me, then I am standing for nothing.
Right.
And I think those of us who have louder voices are, those that love us, and those that don't. I don't want to be liked by someone who is okay with colluding sexual trauma, right?
There's so many things I don't want in my life.
Yeah.
It's hard to me. What the job is to find the good in people and find the good in, what I like is I think that me and you can have a disagreement, but it will never be meant as disrespectful. And we disagree, and then we're going to move on. I think, unfortunately, the other part, too, that you find in the military and the first responder world, and correct me if I'm wrong, which causes trauma, is you disagreed with one of your superiors, then that's held against you for several months and several years later because, you can't have that disagreement. And that causes trauma and that makes strife. And then you have this judgment about, someone says, oh, don't talk to Blythe. She's going to tell you the truth and she's going to make up her truth or whatever. They play you down. But now you don't know that that's what happened. It's just because you were ruffling feathers. I think that plays a factor, in my opinion. But what do
I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, Steve, for sure. Yeah.
I think that we, again, I don't want to process our old company, but I think that that's why sometimes people didn't like me in that company. Because if something, I say to my clients, if it smells like a rose and looks like a rose, I don't need to get pricked to know it's a rose. And if it smells like shit and looks like shit, I don't need to lick it to know it's shit.
It's true.
And I think that that's what happens is when you say the truth, people don't like it. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. You and I are on the same page for sure. For me, I would rather be an advocate than somebody who bends other people's dishonesty. Yeah.
I'd rather you despise me for half a second, but respect that I told you the truth than because I was nice to you, but I didn't make any changes in your life or changes in society or whatever.
And I think that goes a long way working with first responder and military, right? Because the ability to go to someone that's going to say what's true. I always think a good litmus test for like being a supportive trauma therapist or coach or just friend is always say what's true. Like, that's catastrophic. That's the worst thing that could have possibly happened. It is horrific to be molested. It is horrific to be sexually assaulted. Instead of whitewashing language, I think when someone feels like you're just saying the truth, they can trust you. And I think they can trust you if you're willing to sit in the discomfort of saying what's true, even if what's true is really ugly.
Let me throw a little wrinkle, and I'd love to hear your opinion.
Yeah.
That's what I like about us is, so you tell the truth and you're punished for it. Mm-hmm. So is it really worth saying the truth?
Yes.
Why?
Well, not for the victim, but for the ally.
Why? Please explain.
Because I think that people that are victims need allies and advocates to not be liked on their behalf. I do think for the person that is traumatized, there's not always a huge payoff for telling the truth. In fact, there's a negative repercussion for it almost always.
If I hear one more time, what was she wearing or did she drink? I'm going to throw up.
Mm-hmm. It's disgusting.
And I don't care about that. Consent. And you're right. Mm-hmm. I feel the same way. I think that when I see you say advocate, I say therapist, I say counselor, I say peer support, whatever works for people. It doesn't matter because I think
it doesn't matter.
With our mindful guardianship, we were trying to train people to be good peer support people. And hopefully that happened because, we're no longer involved and hopefully they're still supporting each other. But the bottom line is that I think some of our role, when we can have, trauma intelligence, read my book, read 1,400 books. If you don't know how to advocate for your client that's in front of you, and advocate doesn't mean you go on the street and go, she got raped by John Doe. It's advocating so they feel stronger. I think that that's the other part too, because that's why I was asking about the ally, and I see us as allies, as therapists and people. So when I tell people come to therapy, it's because you're going to add an ally on your side who might be uncomfortable, but it will help you.
But it's doing it because they care, right? And hopefully that therapist is also getting therapy for themselves like we do, which is a whole nother topic of conversation. But, I hope that there's more therapists out there than are not that are actually taking their work so seriously that they're getting help for themselves so that they can be their best selves for their clients, which their clients deserve.
I think it's worth talking about, even though, because I think that's important too. I remember, I'll be truthful, when I first started in this field, being in therapy was a sign of weakness even for me.
Yeah.
So I didn't do it. And I'll be, again, full disclosure, I don't think that's secret. I think that's good in talking. It's not, I need to open up about that. But eventually I saw the value in that. And I think that what happens is I went back to a conversation from my undergrad. One of the teachers said to our group, like, okay, how many people are here to learn more about themselves? It was a psychology class. A bunch of hands go up. All right. Do you think that this is going to help you when you're doing therapy? And if people's hands still stayed up, you'll all be lousy fucking therapists because you're doing it for you, not for other people. And I remember that. And I remember saying that healing ourselves, he said, healing yourself has to be done through your therapist. It can't be done through a client. Can it help?
That's true. That's true. That's true.
Through yourself, through your clients. So that's why you therapy. That was his message.
Well, that's a true message. And I think I would be scared to know how many professionals don't get help for themselves. And I think it's brave for you to tell where you were coming from. And that's a perfect example of self-disclosure that you could share with maybe a male client who has been socialized to think that they can't ask for help, and saying, like, I've been there too. That would be a perfect example of something that would be appropriate to share, right? And acknowledge the truth so that they didn't feel alone. Mm-hmm.
And again, by the way, I keep on saying this, but this book is awesome. I read it myself. I use it regularly. There's another copy that's not signed in my house that I used to. And, I think about societal, trauma that you talk about. And one of the things that happens is, and I'll go to our military and first responder world, well, you got to be tough. You got to be able to handle it. You got to be able to do this. And I think that sometimes that is the trauma of the work that they do, but also as a therapist. But you have your shit together. You're a therapist. I tell my clients, as fucked up as you are, I'm just fucked up differently. And I'm working on, and it's okay to say that. But I think that what happens is there's a police officer has to have his stuff together. Firefighter has to have his stuff together. A sergeant, a admiral, or whatever has to have their shit together before they go into. So that's why they don't need it, because they have their shit together. How do we break that stigma? Because it really is stigma plus trauma, because it's an expectation from a community. And for me, when I hear that, I've never asked a police officer that intervened on me, are you in therapy? But when police officers, firefighters are honest about their treatment, I think that's a great thing, breaking out social stigma and these barriers that we've created.
So brave. I think it's so brave and so vulnerable and so helpful, right? And I think that changes one person being willing to share that at a time. I do, right? Because if I'm a firefighter and I share it with someone in my community of firefighters, and then they get help and they can go share it with someone else, down the line. And also seeing someone be willing to work on their secondary trauma, or their own trauma that's also being impacted by their secondary trauma, I think is really powerful, right? And I think those are the people that are going to really change the trajectory of things. Also, the younger generations all have a very different relationship with mental health and mental health support. And I think that in order to stay relevant if they want recruits, the military, first responder communities will either adapt or they will cease to exist, because the younger and younger generations will absolutely not be part of organizations that are not gender respectful, that are not mental health respectful, that are not feminist centered. And so they'll just be irrelevant. Maybe not in the very near future, but as the generations evolve, which I think we always continue to evolve, right? That will not be an acceptable space for most people.
We got a couple of examples for you. I have, I want to say 4 or 5 now, under 25 who worked in the first responder world. They called me within a year of starting the service. And they said, look, I may not have anything wrong with me, but I want you to have a relationship with me. So if I ever need you, you're available. And yeah, we work on little things. And sometimes one of them I see once every 2 months, and that's fine. But they know they have me on speed dial. And this generation of anything, I know there's a lot of questioning sometimes of that generation. The one thing I can tell you is mental health wise, they are very intelligent and they get it. But I think that change in culture has to happen. And again, high chiefs, high lieutenants, high admirals, and commander, you need to understand that that's important. It's not that they have an issue, that's the issue. It's not treating it, that's the fucking issue.
That's it. That's the issue. 100%. That's it. It's nobody's fault they have an issue. It's their responsibility to address it. And that's hard for all of us and it's a process for all of us, right? But it's instrumental in not doing damage to other people.
I think it's instrumental not to, we don't have the Hippocratic Oath in our job, but do no harm. And I think police don't have that Hippocratic Oath of do no harm, but that's the same thing. Military, do no harm. It's to protect our country, to protect and serve our country. And I think that's important, because doing harm to oneself is still doing harm. It
is. That's very, very, very true. I agree.
You look at the suicide rates and that's why I would love to have Jeff on. I hope he does. And Justin, I know you're listening. Justin, you're coming on at some point too. Just wanted to throw that out.
Perfect. He's going to love it. He's going to be great.
But, I think that when you think about the suicide rates, that's what, 70% higher than the general population, if I remember last.
At least.
If you're telling them you have a problem, suck it up, buttercup, you're causing this issue.
You're causing the secrecy.
And you're causing these suicides. I'm going to go step further.
Well, and that causes the suicide. Yeah, I agree with you. You have a direct hand in that person dying. I agree.
Calling him a pussy.
And in our story, like in our book, in the book that we're working on for the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance, I mean, a lot of these stories are people that their loved ones tried to get help and were not met with support within the firefighter, first responder community. Absolutely.
There's a guy coming in.
Or they turn to addiction, which is considered like, the gold standard of personal treatment and those things. And the addiction led to the suicide, right? But the bottom line is we know that a combination of mental health challenges, trauma, and addiction often lead to suicide. So, yeah. And
I think that you talk about addiction. It doesn't have to be substances. Sometimes it's
all kinds of stuff. Yep. Behavioral addiction is real. Yes.
And shout out to Angie Gunn, who worked with us for a while. But, she says there's no such thing as sex addiction. I always told her I agree to disagree with her because, some people go into these deep, dark holes and now suddenly, like I know of a suicide across the country that was someone who got into these sexual porn sites, got into relationships that obviously they weren't relationships, they were money exchanges. And because they ran out of money and they didn't have anything else, they offed themselves. So even the behavioral addictions, to me, is
sex addiction is super real, and it happens to a lot of trauma survivors too. So I've worked with people who they don't even know what they are. They run on trauma, and their sexual connections are all trauma related, and they're impulsive and they're dangerous and they're not aligned with their values. Right? To me, that is addiction. Right?
And that's what I mean. And
at the very least, it's an extreme trauma response that is often never addressed.
And that's what I mean. I mean, there's a case in Massachusetts, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this was the power over women that caused, a big strife to the point where that woman committed suicide and died. And the police officers had used that power all that time. And I'm not going to go into too many details because not that I'm involved in the case, I just don't want to go into details. But the point is that even the addiction of the power over sex, over everything else is also part of the issue, and how many first responders and military is guilty, in my opinion. How many of them have gambling debt from sports betting?
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. Which is, it destroys entire families. Yeah. So that makes sense.
Culture, right? Hey, you're not doing fentanyl. You're just gambling on ping pong in Korea that you know nothing about.
But lying about it and taking family income to do it and then losing your spouse. So I guess if we look at addiction as like negative consequences that go against our values that we can't stop, that lead to other loss and more trauma, right? Yeah.
I mean, I argue with my first responders who do details, who do extra work. I said, that's an addiction. So if you do one in a while, that's great. But if you're addicted to the money and that, you are part of the issue. And that's going to cause you, because when it dries up or you don't have the capacity, you're not going to be able to keep that lifestyle. And then you're going to be hard on yourself and there's going to be negative consequences to that.
Makes sense to me. Yeah.
So I think that's why, like, for me, trauma is all over the place. I think that one of my other guests says grief is the root of all mental health issues. Mm-hmm. I would argue that grief and trauma are both.
I think they go together. It's why I've always been fascinated and so interested in helping people with both, right? Because our grief is directly impacted by our trauma, because the way we view the world is directly impacted by our trauma. And so if one person loses a child and their general belief about the world is that it's horrific, that nothing is fair, that, everything is bad is going to happen to them, that's going to impact their already devastation about losing their child. It validates a worldview that treating that is very different than treating someone who had horrifically lost a child that has a generally positive worldview because they didn't have trauma. And it doesn't mean that they're not both in excruciating pain, but one is on pain on top of pain, and one is on pain, but able to navigate it without all these underlying beliefs about life. Right. And so they have to be addressed at the same time, especially for people with trauma, because their grief is often affected by that negative worldview.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that it's one of the other stigmas I find is that grief. I was actually talking to a former police officer on the way to work today, and it's been 2 weeks. You're good, right? And like grief has some sort of like magical date that it's going to be, or dealt with. And I think that happens a lot with the military and the first responder world, right? And it's really, I think when you think about grief, I mean, I hate to say the expert, but the expert with me about this. Is there really an end date to grief?
There's not an end date to grief, but there's an end date to acute grief and living in it 24/7 if you're willing to take certain steps.
What do you mean
but
by
just
that?
Like everything else, there are people who go through massive loss that literally never move forward from that point. And then there's people who go through massive loss that do the work that they didn't ask to have to do to make sense of that loss, to find peace with the loss. You always know that loss is present, but you can have a fully embodied life without that person. It just might not look the same as it did before.
So
right?
No, I agree, but I want to put it in more even layman terms. So you're telling me acute grief doesn't have a time process. It has to do with talking about it. That's really what it is. It's not a 2-week, 2-month, 2-year project.
It could take many, many, many years, right? And also, it's not just talking about it. It's having evidence-based tools. It's having processes. It's having skills. It's having the right kind of authentic support. It's being exposed to other people who can understand, right? It's so many different things. Because like one of my clients said yesterday, who lost a child, this person, for all intents and purposes, had a very idyllic life before that. And what happened as a result was being othered, right? But also a lot of changes for the better happened as well. More empathy, more connection in real ways. And so that person is never going to be the same. But that might not be a bad thing, because loss can inform us as human beings. It can help us become a better version of ourselves, or it can help us become a bitter, angry, shut down. And that's true of almost all life challenges. So, it's just like trauma. Grief is that thing where you didn't cause it. It's not your fault. But if you don't deal with it, it's going to destroy your life.
Right. That's a good point, Blythe. And I really appreciate it. And I think it makes perfect sense to me. But as we wrap up here, one of the things I want to say about grief from my perspective, if you ever doubt that grief is a positive thing, grief is the reason why I'm here today and doing treatment. And because of that,
that's powerful.
Losing my best friend at 12. And, I'm sure a little more here. He was Jewish, so I don't know what the hell was going on in the 80s, but I was not allowed to go to the funeral. He died in a fire, tragically holding his brother. And my parents, for better or for worse, said, that sucks, but that means you're going to play harder in the game, and we played football together and soccer because he won't be there. And that was my grief process. I don't blame anyone. I do not blame anyone.
No, but it just hurts me for little Steve. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I have compassion for him. But because of that grief, eventually I got it out. I worked with it, and I still sometimes process it. It's not completely over. It's no longer acute, which is good. But I tell people that, I never wanted a human being to ever be alone in that way.
And that's what drives you. So that loss is your purpose, right? Your friend is your purpose, but also your loneliness is your purpose. And I think that's a powerful testimony to the importance of finding something within your pain that can lead to some meaning derivement, right? Thank you for sharing that. And I've known you for a long time, and I didn't know that story.
Well, the secrecy and the privacy. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking about me, but we'll come back.
Yeah.
when I wrote my book, I wrote that whole story. And it happened when I was 12 in Quebec. I'm not going to bore you too long, but we transferred to high school when we were 12. So I just had started at high school.
You did write that. You're right. Okay.
And when I transferred to that high school, they don't know my friend. They didn't know my football life and all that. And he died that September, Labor Day.
Yep. I remember this now from your book. Yes.
My friends, after they read the book, they're like, I feel a little hurt. And I said, my friends of 30 something years. And I said, why is that? You never mentioned AV once to me. And I'd never mentioned it to my friend. That's how secret I kept that pain.
Well, Steve.
No, but that's what I mean about, no, I want to use this as a good way for people to hear. We need to open up about this stuff.
No, I know. I just, I think it's powerful that you were able to take that from your friends too. And to hear like it actually hurt them to not know about what you were going through, which we don't. I think when we hide away our pain, we fear being a burden, or we fear no one's going to be there, or we fear someone will minimize it because they did. Right. And so that's a powerful, I love your story of transformation. And you did share that before. You just have never shared it with me in person. And my aging mind is obvious, right? So, I think it's a powerful story, and I love that you're able to share it here as well. I think it'll help somebody. I really do.
I think that's where we cross the secrecy and privacy line. And this is what I think first responders and military personnel always have to understand, is that we're not immune to trauma or not immune to our own loss. And we have our own stories that sometimes we're ashamed. And then when we say it out loud, I'm like, why was I ashamed of that? Because I put it on myself. So being able to remove the secrecy of it is so important for them to be able to open up. And I'm not saying like, if I was shot at, I've never been shot at, thankfully, but if I was shot at and I go into great detail about being shot at in session, that's probably not appropriate. That's not good disclosure.
No, that's bad disclosure. Yeah.
But being shot at and explaining how it felt and this and that, and going just and say, is that how you felt, or did you feel something else? Now suddenly like, oh shit, he can relate. And
that's good. Yeah, that's good. That's good sharing. I agree. And what you just shared is very powerful sharing. Yeah.
I'm 50 now. I don't care. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
I'm the same way. Something really, I don't know if it's like, we have these developmental milestones even as we get older, and something really does change when you hear the number 50, right? You're just like, what am I doing? Like, what is my purpose, and why do I care so much? Because I don't anymore. You know what I mean? It really does shift.
I remember a time where, and this happens also, I think, in our world, in other worlds, but, I was not sexually attracted, but attracted to people with power, attracted with people who could help me, attracted to people who are good looking, and that happened too. And I realized like, that's all bullshit. Because it doesn't matter all of that. Is that what do I need? Because it doesn't matter if they put me under their wing or whatever. It's important what I need. And yeah, I started out a little earlier, but I think that there's something that happened when I turned 50 that I truly, at this point, I'm like, are we on the same page or not? And if we're not, that's okay. Shake hands, move on. I don't have time to try to please people anymore.
Yeah, I get that. I really do get that. You're such a great person, Steve. I'm so glad we know each other and we're friends. And I'm so glad we've worked together throughout the years. Really, I love what you're doing. I love that your podcast is on this episode, and I haven't been on it in like several hundred, almost a couple hundred, right? And so I just think it's really cool what you're doing. Really.
Well, from the bottom of my heart, I think we always touched the surface. We didn't even talk about the trauma of the collective, and as well as the work trauma.
We're going to have to do a part 2.
I just want you back. The one thing I'm going to say to you, and I commit to this on a podcast.
Uh-oh.
I got to go down to Pennsylvania.
Come see me.
And I'd love to see you, because that's the other part too, which is what I love about our friendships. Our friendship has never been about being close. It's about being close in exchange.
Despite distance. Yeah. All right. I'm going to hold you to that. I want you here in Pittsburgh.
It's recorded here, so I can't change that. But I need to go to Pittsburgh. I've never been to Pittsburgh.
Oh, you'd love it. It's great. It's no Massachusetts, but it's great in its own way. It's got, you know what you would love about Pittsburgh? It's got grit, and you've got grit.
But that's exactly, like, I have 2 clients from Pittsburgh originally.
They're kind of rough around the edges.
They're my people. You know?
Yeah, they're direct, they're gritty, and they're very, very welcome.
And they will give the shirt off their back if you ask them.
It's true. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to get that planned. This is awesome today.
I know this podcast comes out at the end of October, but I pledged that by 2026, by the end of 2026, I will have been to Pittsburgh. I will have, and again, I don't think I need to say that for you. I'm saying it for the audience. And with your consent, I will hug you because I really want to meet you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
But
That's it.
For the podcast, but I didn't think that you were opposed to that.
No.
But and then just speak and be with each other, have a coffee. We've never done that. And
I would love it.
And I think that's what I think we should end on, and not only having you back on the show, but also
in person.
I'm committing to it. I'm 100% committing to go to Pittsburgh to see you.
All right. I can't wait. I'll be here.
Well, how do we reach you, Blythe, before we hang up here? Or not?
Sorry. You can find me on Instagram at Blythe Landry Coach, right? You can find my website, blythelandry.com. The name of my program that is for people who want to be certified grief coaches that have gone through grief is Grief to Purpose. The new website is going to be launched imminently. So it'll be grieftopurpose.net, right? And I'm also on Facebook as Blythe Landry. So I'm everywhere.
And you don't need to have a master's to go do your program on grief coaching, do we?
No, this program is for grievers. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people who have gone through real loss, who are willing to continue to work through that loss, even if they've been working on it for a long time. We want to connect to other people in small community who are grievers and who want to do exactly what Steve did, which is find a way to create some type of purpose, whether that means going out and being a grief coach yourself, doing it as a career, doing it as a volunteer, doing nonprofit, doing stuff in your church, community, whatever it is for you. One of the things I'm most proud of is not only are our students people I would call like unicorns because they're walking around thinking about this kind of stuff. 99% of our students have no experience ever doing this. They want the trauma-informed part that we offer, and they find that through this program, they're getting more healing than they've ever got, even if they've been working on their grief for a long time, exactly because of what Steve said. They're finding a way to create meaning. Even, it's that Viktor Frankl thing, right? The only difference between us and every other living thing is our ability to create meaning. And so if we choose that path, whether it's real, made up, or whatever, it works. So, yeah.
And if you want
to be considered for that program, you just reach out to me. We'll set up a call and see if it's a good fit.
I want to mention that for two reasons. Number one, therapists can join, obviously, very good people. Mm-hmm. But I want to make sure, based on who listens to this podcast, I want my peer support people who work in departments across the country to know that they can join this and being informed, and they can bring it back to peer support because, again, that's perfect.
Absolutely. We've had people's companies even pay for them to do this. We've had a lot of really cool things happen. The peer support people are perfect for this community. Absolutely.
I'm sending that out to my peeps and the emergency responder, first responder, depending on who you'd mean. But that's who I send it out. Again, I vouch for it personally. And you know me. If you've listened to 228 episodes, I've promoted, two things ever as a commercial. I would do 14 commercials for Blythe, and it wouldn't be enough because that's how much I believe in this program. And that's why peers particularly should go there, because sometimes hearing me talk about grief as a therapist, that's helpful, but a peer-to-peer, that's strong. That's That's what
I always say. This is not about me. It's about the community of people that are supporting each other, and it's amazing. And all of our coaches are graduates of the program, and all of our coaches that run the calls, I've removed myself from the center. They're all peers. They're all people who have gone through catastrophic loss and learned to do this work. So awesome. Well, it's been great. And I can't wait to give you a hug in person, Steve.
Well, I'm going to hold you to coming back. Number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two,
I'm coming.
So we go to Pittsburgh, give you a big hug, and me and you can spend hours talking over coffee, which is going to be
talking. Yeah, I know. We'll get into some trouble with all our ideas.
And please go find Blythe. Go do this program. It's amazing. I don't endorse it lightly. I endorse it because I mean it. And if not, if you just want to read about stuff, Trauma Intelligence is a great book that's really reachable. it's not made for professionals. And I mean that professionals can get something out of it. Don't get me wrong. But because it's not made for professionals, it's available to everyone. And I really encourage people to also grab your book. So
thank you so much, Steve.
I'll send you my bill for all these plugs. I'm just kidding.
I know. I'm ready.
But anyway, from the bottom of my heart, I love you, but I'll say it anyway. I love you. I really
love you too. Yeah, same.
And then for those of you who are listening to the podcast still after this Love Fest, please join us for episode 229, and we'll see you then.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.